So take it away.
Okay, well, let's get started. I'm going to talk about sketchnoting today, and this is something I ran into from a colleague of mine in the English department. I teach German at Hope College in Michigan, and my colleague she's in English and she's into cartooning and drawing. And I heard her talk about sketchnoting and about how her students were remembering a lot more content with this and expressing themselves creatively. So I thought, well, I wonder if there's something here for language instructors too. It's a sort of a bigger topic. I mean, sketchnoting essentially is a kind of form of visual note taking. My own teaching context is that I've moved pretty much 100% to comprehensible input when I'm teaching. So that's a lot like Bill Van Patten has been promoting and some that he talked about yesterday. So I'm really interested in students understanding a lot of language. And one of the problems that I've had with that, though, is how do I know when students are comprehending something? And this came from a session that Bill had in one of his shows. I can't remember if it was Tea with BVP or Talking L2, which hopefully some of you are familiar with and should look up the replays if you're not. One of Bill's points was that in a classroom based on comprehensible input, students need to demonstrate comprehension regularly and much more frequently than I was certainly used to doing. I believe in comprehensible input, but I use my own intuitive beliefs about what's comprehensible, and that doesn't always match student experience, as I find out, where I think I'm being perfectly comprehensible, but I've lost them after 20 seconds, and they've kind of lost the thread. And so Bill encourages us to stop more frequently to see our students comprehending. And there are different ways we can do this, right? So we've got the cone here, and these are well known to instructors already. But if you start at the top, it's not so hard for students if they're already at advanced level. It's not too difficult for them to demonstrate that they understand either a video or a text or somebody speaking. They can paraphrase things that they heard in the target language if they're good with advanced level. They can recast it. They can interrogate and ask questions, demonstrating comprehension by finding points of curiosity or conflict or questions. They can make connections, etc. At the bottom, when we're just starting out, we learn and as we become instructors, things like total physical response, short response, let students vote with their feet to demonstrate comprehension by moving around, or principled use of the L1 to affirm either translations or that they know what's going on. The part that's a bit tricky for me is the middle part. And that is the part where we're talking more intermediate, low intermediate to advanced low. And that's where I live. That almost all of my students are in that range. And what's difficult about, well, we do it, but what's challenging to me about demonstrating comprehension is that at the intermediate level, many students can produce sentence, phrase, sentence level, but not really discourse, paragraph level. That's more of an advanced skill. So, but since comprehension precedes production, they can understand small articles, short stories, narratives, even short videos to a pretty good extent, but they can't paraphrase it, they can't ask questions, they can't employ higher literary skills or literacy skills in it. And so I'm always looking for ways to have them demonstrate comprehension, and not the kind of things that happen in standard textbooks where you have reading comprehension questions that don't actually demonstrate comprehension at all. Maybe they point out single words or something, but that's not what I'm looking at. So this idea of sketchnoting just kind of struck me that this might be a way for us, especially as instructors dealing with intermediate and advanced low students, to have them demonstrate comprehension of actual texts or extended discourses without having to fail because they don't have the linguistic resources to do some of the more advanced ways of demonstrating comprehension. So sketchnotes are, there's different ways to do this, but the basic idea is they're rich visual notes. And as you can see, some of these things, they use hand-drawn pictures and a lot of icons. So this isn't for artists. It's the idea of using simple visual cues, simple cultural icons or things to demonstrate comprehension or to make a point or make a connection. But it's something that you don't have to be artistically talented to do. Now, outside the language, I mean, I haven't seen any research that's pointed out that these have been used extensively in language courses. They're used generally a lot with high schoolers and college students, for reading, and they're great at helping students retain information. You can see some of the positive aspects here. But you see, I'm excited about bigger picture and multisensory to give students a non-linguistic way of expressing comprehension together with words and phrases of larger texts or bigger ideas. So that was what I thought, okay, maybe there's some potential for Sketchnotes here. It's, of course, I don't have time to introduce everybody into exactly how Sketchnotes work. I will have some links at the end of the presentation where there's plenty of videos on YouTube. And my colleague Beth does workshops. She does a workshop for my students every year. So you might want to contact her if you're interested in pursuing this later. But some of the things that are basics is that it's not just drawing per se, but it's using containers or font or icons, connectors, and even here color to show connections between two ideas, to show a process. And I will tell you just real quick, I think I bring it up a little bit later too, but I'm especially excited about connectors because in my students, to have connectors between sentences and paragraphs is an advanced skill. But they still have these ideas they want to express, but they don't have the linguistic means to do that. If they're creating a sketch note, they can use icons and pointers and other things to show these connections between elements of a text or causality without having to have the language skills that are more advanced at that point already. Here is an example of what Sketchnotes can do. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse that I'm going over it. I'm not sure if my pointer's coming across. But you see that they're pretty basic things, and you can group ideas together. You can show causality through these arrows. This particular slide shows how color can be used to bring out things and make connections between two ideas. I mean, this drawing is much nicer than I can do, but the idea, I could do it with stick figures, even if I can't draw the people yet. And you can see that it provides a way of looking or of demonstrating what you know that's not just a blob of text. Here's another instructor who uses these different aspects for the sketch note. He encourages the students to use bullets, arrows, emoticons, little things of nature. And you can see, you can teach yourself to draw these in about 30 seconds. So it's not an insurmountable obstacle at all to learn the skills to do this. So I'm going to show you what happens when Beth, my colleague, has done workshops with my students. And I'll show you some of the results that sort of happen. This is sort of the process of training students. Now, as an instructor, I love having her come do this workshop because she knows about it. She's well versed, and she's a lot more systematic than I am. So that we have to make sure. One thing I've learned doing sketch notes with my students is that I need to take the time to explain it. And that usually means a whole class session and then follow up throughout. So it's not something that comes instantly. It needs its time. But the first task to learn this is, you can see this text on the screen, which is from Theodore Roosevelt. And it's a statement about how you should be courageous. So the task is, students read this short text, and then in 2 minutes, they demonstrate their understanding of that text in the form of a sketch note. If this were a workshop, we would do this all together, but we can't do that now, and that's okay. If you're doodling it and I can't see you, that's fine. Feel free to draw and kind of take that challenge while I'm speaking about this. Let me show you some of the last time we did this it's probably about 6 weeks ago. I'm going to just show you some of the student responses. So you see, you don't start, with fully professionally developed sketch notes at first. Here was a first response. So the text is about, it's not the critic who should be praised, but the one who takes the risk, who risks failure. And you see here's an arena, there's dust, sweat. So some of the words come up here. And a sketch note includes words. It includes language, just not paragraph kind. It's more phrases, sentences. And then there's the arrow that shows from this goes to this without effort. And there's already some personal interpretation of this text, in that the sweating in the arena is equated with sweating at your desk doing your homework late at night, which is something I think some of our students understand. And then the result to you win if you've put the effort in. So that was her interpretation of that text. The next one is a little different. You can see, I'm not sure exactly, I think it's supposed to run across from upper left to right and down, But you can see here's the critic and it has the invalid text over it. Here's the sweating, laboring person. Here's the failure, and then on repeat, there's success. I like this bit here. Victory is built on work, failure, shortcomings, error, mistakes. And the picture illustrates that very well. They turn those words into the foundation for the word at the top. This is something intermediate students can do with their language skills. Let me show you one more here. One or two more. Here's another one. And what I think is really interesting about these ways of interacting with the text is that each student has a very personal approach to it. And each student has to summarize what each learner does, summarizes what's going on, and each learner will pick out different aspects of the text that are salient. So they become very personal. And for me, as an aside, as an instructor, I really enjoy looking at these and trying to make sense out of them, as opposed to reading 30 different responses about the same text in text where my mind starts blurring after response number 5. So for me, it's actually a nice way to see what's going on in the student's mind. And it also can show me very quickly if they actually comprehend the text. So here is an example done by the workshop leader, and she's already very good at making these drawings like that, and not much text for her, just the single words. And then I'm going to take a risk here and show you my effort. Don't laugh. Well, I can't hear you if you're laughing anyway. I was showing courage because I don't draw very well, but I just threw myself into it. And here is the person criticizing in the upper left and the failure. There's the arena. There is walking through, talking about the success and placing on the podium. So that was my takeaway from this. I'm very procedural in that. And what was fun at the workshop is that the participants kind of got into how they made this, and we talked about it in small groups. So the workshop leader put us together. We talked about our drawings. We talked about why we did it the way we did it, what we were thinking. And it was something that was very enjoyable, and people liked expressing what they were doing. Perfect. And that's what I do in my language classes. Talking about your sketch notes is a great conversation thing. It's a great at working with skills of presenting your ideas to others. So let me talk about a few things about why I'm sort of excited and geeked out about sketch notes. First, like I mentioned, for where I live with most of my students, top of the novice end right through intermediate, it allows you to work at the word and phrase level and communicate bigger ideas in a convincing way. So I like that you're not reliant on whole bunches of text. I like it that it provides a way of putting in some of these linguistic tools that they may not have yet, of causality and connectors. I like it that it scaffolds conversation. As I just mentioned, students have their sketch note and can talk about it. And this is, as an aside, one thing I do quite a bit with my students is pre-speaking activities where students will write freely for 3 to 5 minutes on a topic. And then that is to prepare for speaking, and they put the paper away and then talk to one another without the paper. So the writing is simply a way of organizing their thought to allow oral production at the intermediate level to work a little better. These sketch notes do the same thing and have the advantage that students are not tempted to just read off their paper if they feel insecure about their oral abilities. They can't. There's nothing to really read off. They've got words and pictures, and they have to orally make sense of it to the people that they're listening to. And that is a great way to sort of scaffold their production about complicated topics sometimes with each other. It's great for content learning. That's what it's designed for. The sketch notes are designed to help students remember. All of my upper division courses are content courses. So this is a nice benefit too, is they actually remember details better. And a thing I've noticed that I wasn't expecting was that because it brings in other kinds of cognition, visual cognition, and it relies just at the word and phrase level, in my program, I'm the German prof. And so when I have an upper division course, I've got intermediate lows, maybe a novice high that snuck in by accident, all the way up to advanced, low, and mid in the same class. And those level differences can be an issue, but when we're working with sketch notes, that levels out a lot of those differences because people are able to do it just with words or mostly images or with more sophisticated text. So that allows my students to work together in groups and do the same sort of tasks, even if they're at pretty different levels with their German. So here's a few things about how I have used Sketchnotes. I've been using them for about 3 years, once a year in a class. I did a German economics class where I started. This is an advanced class, so intermediate up to advanced. I co-taught a class on ancient Rome and the Third Reich last semester. That was in English. But we were reading some pretty heavy duty stuff for that class, so I got to experiment with using Sketchnotes for English, but for hard texts. And then I'm currently teaching a class on German environmentalism where we're using Sketchnotes as part of our coursework. Here's an example of what the students are doing in the environmental course. This is their first Sketchnotes. They watched a video about these are mines, open coal mines in Germany that environmentalists are very interested in getting shut down. Germany is actually moving away from coal totally, and they should be off, I think, brown or the soft coal in a year or two. But this here shows what they understood about the video, about how it's an open pit mine, it's used for the energy, and then that goes to the cities. You see a crying globe. Anfang is the beginning, end is the end, and some text. And the German's reasonable. But when I look at this, I can tell they watched the video and they got the basic idea of what was going on in the video. That was giving sort of an outline of how these things work. Here is another one. This one I had a little more trouble following, and I would encourage that student to use some text at all instead of yes and no. It's the sort of thing where it doesn't communicate as well to somebody who hasn't watched the video. But I could recognize elements of the video in here. So I knew that there was some comprehension. The text note or this image would need some work for students. So I would give feedback about use more text, make it a little clearer to somebody. Here's another sketch note. You can see it's a first. They get neater as they get practice at this. This was sort of a first draft of it. This was okay, but I can see I could recognize quite a bit of it. For a first effort, that wasn't too bad. And this one was a good one, I thought. It was clear. The text was clear. You can see there's 1 or 2 fonts in there. You can see how the student was using basic iconographical things. You can see a flow to it using the arrows that pointed how it went. This was a lot more detail. This person watched the video in great detail and brought it all out into the sketch note. And this one was good. I like this one a lot. And a last one here. So let me get to some of the, this is one sketch note here that came up from it was a response to a book chapter. And I really enjoyed using this as one of the ways, there were other ways to interact too, with summarizing chapter. This was in a book, a Most Dangerous Book about Tacitus. Heavy lifting for my students, so they had to read it carefully. This would be about a 12 to 15 page chapter, and it represented all in one page. And that's sort of I'm not going to say rule, but you limit yourself to one page, even for larger things, so you get and summarize the stuff that's most crucial and leave out the details that aren't needed. This was a student who was good. Midway through the course, they were coming along quite well. And then knowing the chapter, I could recognize all the elements in this sketch note. So here's some takeaways from students. They report remembering content a lot more than when they simply write about it. Some students enjoy the nonverbal modality quite a bit. There are students who are very verbal and don't like this because it exposes a part of their thinking that maybe is not as developed. They'd like to rely on what they're good at. So I make my students do this for the first half of the semester as a practice to give it a real shot. But as the semester goes on, I leave more freedom for using sketch notes or other things that students feel work better for them, to give them the choice of sort of how they interact with texts. Students were using sketch notes in other courses because it was so successful in this. They began taking notes in other courses using sketch notes. I have here language uncertain. What is that? I don't know at all what effect sketchnoting has on language acquisition. I believe, and this would need to be borne out through looking into it, it does, because it encourages student to comprehend. And it demonstrates comprehension. And if comprehending input is how you learn, hence ergo, it's going to develop proficiency. I have heard from many students, like this quote here, I can't do the sketch note unless I understand the text, so I have to read it over and look stuff up and think about it before I do my sketch note. Yes, I'm cackling fiendishly. That's comprehension. And it also tells me that there are other tasks that I might have done previously that did not require that they actually comprehend as well in order to fulfill the task. So that's one thing I like about Sketchnotes is they push comprehension because you can't really do them if you don't. And I can look at a sketch note and say right away, this student did not understand what they were looking at. It's not reflected in the sketch note at all. As a little freebie, I've started working with this as well in smaller ways. It's a way of interacting with texts I call text illumination, where they doodle and use some of these same skills from sketchnoting, but write it right on the page to interact with texts, since comprehension is really important to a CI-based classroom. So that's another way I've extended it. These aren't full sketch notes, these are aspects of sketch notes that they write right on the paper. Okay, I think I'm it. I have a link here for resources. I think I put it on Google Drive. I think I can share in the chat window the link for anybody who wants, and then you can get to these links. This is Beth Tremblay's video introducing a lot of other resources. And if anybody's interested in trying this out and would like help with the workshop, Beth is available. She does it for me, and I've got her email there.
All right, thank you so much, Lee. We give you some virtual claps, and we have a lot of questions. I don't know if you're able to see them, but
should I stop sharing the screen now? Is that how it works best?
You can, yes.
Yeah.
If,
okay, you can go ahead and I haven't seen the chat, so go ahead and ask. You can.
Okay, so
why don't you read them for me? So
I'm gonna scroll down and let's see. We have a question from Claudia. Do you evaluate it, and how do you know if they comprehended?
Yeah, I do, but a lot like was mentioned in the previous presentation and yesterday, I'm looking for engagement, and I'm looking for progression, and I'm looking for work. So I grade it if they've put the work into it where I see they've moved somewhere. I don't have a high standard. I'll get feedback in terms of how I think they can communicate more effectively, but I want them to take risks, so I don't want to hammer them to grade. Grade inflation problem, probably, but I think grade should be done away with too in language classes, but that's another matter. So I do give feedback on it, and it's with practice, if I know the material they're doing and I see the sketch note, I can tell pretty quickly whether they understand it. And if I'm not clear, I just say, look, I didn't understand what you were doing here. Why don't you tell me what you were doing?
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Kira. Do students share the sketches with others?
Yes, they don't have to, but I love doing it in class. And they also, occasionally, I will have them do screencasts of their sketch note, either recording it from screen, or actually I just have them put their sketch note on a table and take their cell phone and record themselves talking it through. So that's a sort of a presentational task, and that helps me understand whether they know what they're doing too when they start explaining verbally what's going on. But students enjoy sharing this with each other, so that's a staple to most of my classes.
Nice. Florencia also wants to know if the emphasis is on, excuse me, on drawing, or if it's possible to have a tech-enhanced version, kind of like clip art and icons, or maybe auto draw.
Some, I haven't experimented with that. Some people use their iPads and sketch that way. I believe, again, there is some research that actually using pencils and pens opens up some different modalities. So I like having that, but then presenting it digitally. But yeah, I know a lot of people who do the sketch notes on iPads. But about multimedia, I don't know. It's been something about the handwork that I've appreciated about this.
Okay, I'm scrolling down. We have another one from Rita. What are your thoughts on using this tool as a way to offer equitable opportunities and to be more inclusive with students whose level of English can also be a barrier to demonstrate comprehension?
I think I like that, if I understood it well. What it does is, as I mentioned before, with multi-level classes, it allows people who aren't as proficient linguistically to participate equally. And what it also does is people who are just better at drawing or thinking visually get excited. They feel like they're bringing something into the class that they haven't been able to bring in. And it's always great to me when students can bring in their abilities and competencies and they feel empowered that way. So I think so. I think there's potential there.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat except for somebody who's asking if you were willing to share. I think that you have
Yeah,
your email
let me
at the
see
end.
if I can get that link and put it in the chat. And maybe somebody can test it out right away to make sure it's working correctly. So here it is. I believe I've shared it with the world.
Yes, we can see it. If the group has more questions or comments or want to share experiences, you can unmute. We have a few more minutes until we go on break. So,
hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Montserrat, and I have a question. Have you thought of using this to check on non-comprehension as a way of an interactive tool, in the sense that you present a source of input to the students do their best, but also allow them to show non-comprehension through Sketchnotes as a way for the teacher to know where there is some gaps in the comprehension. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that has happened incidentally, but I would probably prefer for my own class that they just say, Professor, we don't know what's going on, that I can intervene there, because it's kind of a high investment to be doing a sketch note. That could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And if it's kind of a long way and a lot of work to do something that maybe was already clear. What miscomprehension comes out, though, is if they think they understand it, but it's not what the actual message was. That does come out. But I've not thought about using these to probe for lack of comprehension.
Anybody else? We have 3 more minutes.
I see. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Really quickly, how often do you do this, Lee? For
it's maybe once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the other ones.
Every text, I would say.
No. It's you don't want to overuse it. And I do text illumination, as I mentioned there. I'll sometimes have that they print out their texts or do it digitally and write all over it, so they're interacting directly with the text. I like reflections. I mean, Corey would appreciate that. I've listened a lot, and they'll do reflections about the course and about readings. And then I do curiosity worksheets, which is another way of showing engagement with reading. So you shouldn't overuse it. It's one of the tools. So.
All right, we have a comment, I think, from Lisa. She says, as a teacher who's about artists, I also want to plug reverse sketch notes, where students collaboratively tell a story and the teacher has to draw a picture of it on the board. It is a lot of fun and a good laugh. So I guess that all of us artists handicapped can try it.
Well, what I've done something like that before, and it's a great way so they know if I understand them or not. I'll draw what they're saying, and they're like, no, that's not it. And like, okay, what do I do? So they get to correct and then laugh at my drawing. That's true. So I very much like that. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? I'll just piggyback off what Florencia was asking. I did. I used AutoDraw a few times, and it wasn't for comprehension in the L2 necessarily. We were also, it was a sociolinguistic class in the language, and it worked really, really well. They were doing it on real time, and then they're able, so now we are remote synchronously, and they were able to share in the chat box the drawings that they did. So I think that the concern of using the handwriting or the hand drawing in a situation like the one we are in now could be solved with AutoDraw as a good option.
Well, yeah, and my students they scan the show the camera, so they work in breakout rooms in Zoom and show each other the sketch notes and talk about them. So it's not a barrier. Yeah.
All right, we have a lot of people thanking you and English.
Try it out. It's been great for me. So.
Thanks, everybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and then we are going to come back with more presentations. And then don't forget that we're going to have a workshop at the very end. So we look forward for that too. Thanks to the 3 presenters today for 3 engaging talks. Thank you so much for participating in your thoughtful questions, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you, Muriel, for your help.